Hey everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the interviewing process and something called as structured interviewing. So let's start with a scenario. As leaders, you need to hire the best for your team, and interviewing, hiring is a very important skill to get better at. Now, let me give you a quiz. During an interview process, let's say you are interviewing or the folks on your team are interviewing. How quickly during the process do you think that an average interviewer makes their decision? Well, based on various studies, 60% of the interviewers make the decision of whether they're going to hire the person or not recommend a hire within the first 15 minutes. And essentially, they're using the rest of the time to really confirm their bias. So if someone has decided a no hire in their mind, this is a decision that kind of is made unconsciously based on biases, based on if they look similar, if they resonate with a few principles, the way they talk, the way they have answered questions. These are all biases which come in. And within basically in a few minutes within the interview, you're making a snap judgment. Now, as you can imagine, this is not good, which is not being able to clearly judge, right, is going to be problematic from the from the hiring standpoint. So one of the key things which is very important to understand is no matter how good we are, in fact, everyone judges or thinks that they are really good in the interview process in terms of finding the right candidates, you have to realize that you cannot be trusting your gut, right? So essentially, a lot has been seen or reviewed, studied here in terms of many of us think that we are excellent judges of character. In fact, there is a lot of academic study, and to be honest, I completely realized that early on in my career, it is something very similar, which is thinking that you can within that short period of time be a good judge, right? So that's not the case. And I think this is one very important point to highlight. The second point here is that these unconscious snap judgments, they're heavily influenced by how we think and shift from assessing the complexity of a candidate's competency into hunting for evidence, which is there's something which is a practice which will eventually lead to bad hires or surprising hires which you did not actually realize that this is something you could have verified, you could have checked, you could have confirmed during the interview process. So this is where structured interviewing as a concept comes in. In fact, Google has applied structured interviewing very, very effectively. What it really means in simple terms is having the same interviewing methods to assess candidates. Another way to say it is having a predefined set of rubrics and questionnaires that are applied consistently, so that during the interview process, you are not making a judgment call of whether the person is good or bad. What you're instead doing is you're walking through the rubric of predefined attributes you're looking for and making notes, taking down notes on what you're observing. You are observing as an interviewer. The synthesis of your notes as well as everyone else that interviews the candidate is another step, which is at that time really sort of putting all the pieces together and making sense of whether the candidate is good or bad. So structured interviewing, again, is an aspect which pays off rich dividends. It requires preparation work. There's always a temptation to skip. There's always an aspect that, hey, we are good at it. But realize this, to ensure consistency within your team, to ensure consistency that everyone in your team is able to look for candidates which meet the requirements, not because of, they look similar or they look different. And to be very transparent about this, I have seen so many scenarios where you get a feedback in terms of, hey, the person did not cut it, right? Or did not meet the bar. Everyone has a different bar that they have defined for themselves. And this is where a lot of good candidates actually are accidentally rejected, which is shameful. And the other extreme is good talkers, people who are able to judge others and influence others quickly, sometimes make it into the team, which is again equally bad. You did not want, or you necessarily did not fit the requirements that were required. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, as an example, walk you through the structured interview process that we've established at Unravel. And this will give you an example of what a process like this should look like. Obviously, you can improvise and build on it. Now, Unravel being a startup, this is something that clearly is a combination of being effective at the same time lightweight. So we cannot have too heavyweight a process, just because of the rate at which we are growing. So first off, having well-defined steps in the process, right? So think of this as a case study. In our process, as resumes come in, there's some amount of pre-filtering that happens. This pre-filtering is based on an initial quick assessment of the candidates in terms of cultural fit, motivation, so on and so forth. Once that's cleared, the next step is online coding. We use multiple coding platforms to give them coding assignments. Once that's done, there's a follow-up technical screening, which is focusing on further double-clicking on coding algorithms, data structures, really the system building expertise. Followed by that, we get into what we refer to as a day in a life. So this is like a half day or a full day interview where you are given problems, the candidates are given problems, which are real, similar to the kind of tasks they would be working once they join. Followed by that, there is what we refer to as the level specific leadership evaluation. This is a rubric that we internally have for different levels, and really sort of ensuring that the candidate at that level is able to perform with those specific qualities and traits. Cultural fit, this is more, I would say a confirmation. Some amount of that happens in the pre-filtering phase as well. Now, in your case, you may have more steps, less steps, but there is some kind of a process or some kind of a sequence that you have, right? Now, the very first step is, in fact, the preparation, which I talked about. It has to be as seamless as possible. So there are two parts that we are covering in the preparation phase. One is a questionnaire, which the candidate, which the hiring manager fills out in terms of details for the candidates. And the second one is bringing together the team, the hiring team, preparing an interview rubric, right? Now, with respect to the questionnaire, those questions specifically are something along the lines of, what are the key skills? What is the first project the person will be working on, the candidate will be working on? What are key attributes of the tasks? That is, like, when you think of skills and tasks, what are four kinds of tasks in their day to day? For that level of tasks, what are some of the you can think of this as leadership skills or soft skills that are required in addition to technical skills. Like if you're in a role which requires a lot of collaboration, for instance, you're an SRE, which requires collaboration. So that's the aspect of fact gathering from the hiring manager. So as a hiring manager, filling in the questionnaire that basically grounds what the role is, what the person would be doing, what is going to be the first 60, 90-day project, what are skills and tasks. The next piece is the interview rubric. Now, in the interview rubric, there are multiple different parts, and that goes back to the process that I laid out earlier. So let me sort of go to the rubric. And today, the rubric for us is maintained in an Excel sheet. So now let me walk you through the Excel sheet in this case. So like I mentioned, the initial part is more of pre-filling to create this questionnaire of requirements for the job. Step one, the online coding. And in this, we have different profiles. So the idea here would be to zero down and decide which profile the candidate would be given for the online test. Next step, technical screening. And within this context, it is about giving a technical problem. What you see here is a rubric. That is, once the problem is given, what are we looking for as they are describing the solution? So the rubric here, based on our requirements, is something along the lines of understanding, were they able to grasp the problem, logic, were they able to break down the problem, assumptions and testing, extremely important, were they able to have ideas on writing unit tests, integration tests, right, and so on. And in this context, the interviewer is recording their observations, writing down the details of what they saw and observed for each of these aspects. Next comes the day in life scenarios. Um, Again, within engineering team, we have structured ourselves into different pillars, and each pillar kind of has examples. And during that process, during the day in a life scenario, once a problem is given and the candidate is working on it, depending upon the level at which you're looking them for, each of those levels, these levels are additive. So depending upon if it's level 3, you will be looking for levels 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the rubric. And the idea here is of a deeper drill down. So technical screening would be more in terms of coding algorithms and data structures. This is within the context of the actual task, right? How realistic were in defining tests, unit tests, integration tests. Now you can see that there's a lot of emphasis that we have, which is the reason we double click on some of these aspects, right? Design documentation, debugging, reviewing code, how data driven they are in terms of understanding and gathering usage, debugging, and so on, right? And then moving further, going to the next step is the last step, which is in the bucket of, or second last step, which is in the bucket of engineering leadership rubric, right? And again, based on the levels, we are looking at specific skills like architecture design, critical thinking, task prioritization, sprint planning, right? Specifically for each of them, having the observations noted down during the interview. And the last step is what we refer to as a cultural fit. Now, this also happens as pre-filtering. This is a time to not just, I would say, further drill down, but also be clear in terms of aspects that as the candidate joins, what are areas we should be aware of? Really avoiding surprises, where we should be helping them further, where we should be mentoring and training them further, right? So cultural fit is again a combination of values. These are values that we look for: obsession, curiosity, motivation, collaboration, and so on. So that's one bucket. The other buckets here are adaptiveness. Adaptiveness is key, especially in a startup environment, right? Strategic versus execution, outcome versus learning, growth versus fixed. And growth versus fixed would be more an example of trying to judge, whether a candidate is more of a risk taker versus more conservative, right? And the final piece here is basically getting a good sense in terms of what I refer to as the three circles: the passion, strength, and needs. Hopefully that gives you an example here or understanding in terms of how you can sort of think about this as a structured process, so that the team before the interview happens is aligning on what all within these sheets we are looking for. So specifically when we think of skills, those specific rows are highlighted in bold as must-haves to cover during the interview process. So different candidates may have different things when it comes to leadership aspects, the role-related leadership aspects that we want to really make sure that we are double clicking on, which is what this rubric is about. So takeaways, folks: structured interviewing, multiple ways to say it, but really twice as effective in predicting job performance and unstructured ones. End of the day, yes, neither structured or unstructured is 100%, but it increases your probability significantly. And again, speaking from experience, by having a structured approach, it gives you a clear mind frame, a mindset to clearly understand what you're looking for and evaluate consistently for those skills. Removes the bias from the process, which is huge, really important for apples to apples, and helps builds a competency model. That is, over time, if you follow this process, you can actually correlate once the candidate joins and he or she is performing well or not performing well. You can go back and correlate the data points. So I really encourage all leaders to A, understand structured interviewing, and B, really sort of think about it as extremely valuable. It requires preparation, it requires time, but think of it. One bad hire can take you months of opportunity cost, opportunity that's lost, both in terms of potential morale to the team, as well as the right candidate who could have come in and knocked the ball out of the ballpark. Essentially, you're looking for winners. You're looking for folks that have this as their dream job, the job that you're offering, and at the same time, a clear win-win with respect to their skills that they would further grow and enhance in the journey of the company. Takeaway assignment, one aspect which every leader should be doing is really reflecting on any unconscious biases that you may be applying during the interview process. Are there specific traits that trigger a positive bias, a specific way that, in your mind, yes, if the person said this or did this, they must be good. Most of the time, this is encoded based on our values, series of experiences we have. So really sort of stepping back and thinking through. It's a great assignment to do, irrespective, not just in the hiring context, but overall as a leader. That's all for this session. I hope you guys found this useful. Thank you so much.